Disco Elysium is really good, so instead of watching this video, you should play it first, as I'm going to heavily spoil the investigation. It took me a while to get Disco Elysium. It's a unique game, a choice-based RPG, about what type of detective you are, in an isometric perspective with a beautiful art style. You start with two compelling mysteries in discovering what happened to the dead man hanging behind the whirling in rags, and the one waking up inside. Most people probably got it from the first conversation.
The words have already left your mouth.
What was that? That's not even how words are used. What did you say? Come on, say it again.
Or from a petty attempt to run from your debts. I only got it after failing this skill check. These moments are incredible. They're rooted in failure, and they really help you escape the traditional RPG methodology of just reloading every failed check so you don't miss content. That's important, as I believe Disco Elysium is a game about failure. To elaborate on that, I'm going to have to talk about the actual gameplay. Disco Elysium is ostensibly a role-playing game where you choose what kind of cop you are. It allows you to do this through a fairly simple system of conversations. Honestly, it's so simple, why don't other games do this? While an insane way to achieve a dynamic conversation system, it works brilliantly, providing a responsiveness in conversation that is unparalleled across the medium. Disco Elysium, like many RPGs, also uses skill trees as a way to develop your character and playstyle during your journey in Revachol. Where Disco Elysium differs from its peers is the Thought Cabinet. The Thought Cabinet is an inventory of thoughts where you can equip and, for the cost of a level, forget. It allows you to customize your detective further and help truly personalize him and your journey through Revachol. The conversations in Disco Elysium are the main way you progress. Gathering physical evidence, investigating the crime scene, all of these things are useful, but their role is to serve as ammunition in interrogations, both figuratively and literally. What they do help you with are skill checks. Skill checks are the bread and butter of the gameplay. Skill checks are split into two types, active and passive. Passive checks are more subtle, but perhaps more influential, with a hidden check in the background that allows the skill to pipe in with their observations on the conversation or task at hand. Active checks come in two forms, red and white. Red checks can only be taken once, while white checks can be retried after failing, as long as you level up the skill in question or discover anything that reopens a line of inquiry. Now, to get back to the actual game. Day one is pretty straightforward. You wake up, putz around, get your bearings, meet Kim Kitsuragi, the greatest man to ever walk this earth. Realize you've lost your badge and gun, look at the body, have a conversation with it. Eventually, you need to go interview the local big shot, the union boss. On the way, you run into Measurehead.
Your body betrays your degeneracy.
Now, Measurehead is unfortunately guarding the way. Measurehead correctly assesses that by the lack of indentations in your skull, you are inferior. He's not going to make an exception, and he's not going to let you through easily.
It's another drink. Occidental Haplogroup B4 is done giving orders around here. The influence of the ham sandwich race is waning.
The options laid out before you are pretty stark. Internalize your inferiority and accept Measurehead's superior cranial structure, or you can try to knock him out. Knocking him out will depend a lot on your build. If you're a physical build, it's difficult, but not impossible. If you're running a more intellectual set of skills, the check will feel practically impossible with what you have going on. And yet, when you look at the check, it's white. It can be redone. At some point while going down the options, you will likely interrogate him about craniometrics, and after pointing out a hole in his theory, you get just a little bit under his skin, and the check gets that bit easier. If you choose to go for it, then and there, you will probably still fail. Measurehead, catching your fist and crushing it into submission, until you admit to being an inferior, or hold on with copious nose-fed usage. Afterwards, Kim will ask you not to pick fights you can't win. But agreeing would be like letting down your haplogroup, Occidental B4. So after Volition encourages you to swing again and getting tips from the scab leader, you walk back up. 42%, the wind in your sails, you knock him out. Except probably not, as 42% isn't rare, but it's not stellar odds. This isn't the end, however. Returning to the backyard with the hanging body, after passing a difficult perception check, you make your way to the roof, where it's an easy hop down too. Oh, for fuck's sake. Now, at this point, it's time to sadly trek back to the big man himself. And it's time to get racist.
Advanced race theory.
After communicating with your mentor in La Institución del Racismo, he will finally give you passage. At this point, you can pick yourself up, and for the cost of a skill point, get rid of that garbage and move on with your investigation. The game pulls this trick a couple of different times, putting massive roadblocks in front of you, some of which you might be able to handle, and most of which will require a lot of snooping around and compromises before you can handle it. On day 2, the Hardy Boys set up shop inside the Whirling in Rags. The Hardy Boys claim to have lynched the man out back together as a tactic to diffuse responsibility. After a small conversation where you don't really get anywhere, it becomes clear that a crucial witness isn't going to be revealed until you prove your authority to Titus, the leader of the Hardy Boys. Despite how impossible it seems, thanks to an unorthodox style of interrogation, you begin to,
What in the name of fuck are you doing?
But I don't want to give you my gun.
The fuck is happening, Titus? What are they whispering about?
Easy, Shanks. I want to see where this is going.
Police job? Be careful, it's loaded.
Good. Now put it in your mouth.
What are you doing?
Genuine panic flies across the lieutenant's face.
Fellas, you getting any of this? Fellas, the cop is really threatening to off himself. This is insane.
No, that is not what is happening. This show is unnecessary. Give me my gun, now.
He's desperately trying to offer a counter-narrative. There is none.
He's not gonna off himself. Come on.
No. He'll do it. Go ahead, son. 3, 2.
2, 1. Do it. Get this one thing right. No. Give it to Lieutenant Kitsuragi. It's not too late. You can still spin this as some kind of tactic. There will be no spinning. Do the honest thing. Pull the trigger.
Ignoring that unfortunate timeline, it's a seemingly impossible check for most builds. And to me personally, it was a really important moment, because I did pass Measurehead by pure luck and spin-kicked the shit out of him. I had no such luck on day 2, and I felt stuck after failing the check twice. So I did every single little bit of side content I could, and realized there was only one way out of this. I was going to have to compromise. On day 1, you meet the little scamp running the union. Everard Clare, the cheeky little lad that he is, brings up the fact that he knows you lost your gun, and tells you that if you want it back, you're going to have to do something for him. I parceled that little threat deep into a forgotten corner of the detective's brain, alongside his alcohol addiction, his cigarette addiction, his drug addiction, and the specter of his ex-something. But out of options, and not really seeing another way, I approached the door he wanted open. Kim reassures you that he understands why you're doing this, but he does offer an alternative of just pretending you opened the door. I decided to commit to it, fairly confident that if I didn't, he would find out somehow. After entering the apartment and finding out the guy was a huge racist, it feels a little bit better. And it felt even better after Everard questioned what was inside. After the ordeal and getting the thumbs up from the big man himself, I headed back to Titus, only to fail again for the third time. Thankfully, after this time, you can ask Kim, a man who is not lacking in authority. He picks up the slack for you, and so ends the roadblock. The apartment was a huge roadblock for me on a personal level. I really hated the perceived moral compromise, and I didn't want to accept the necessity of doing something bad in order to complete the investigation. It was at this point I truly accepted that sometimes I was going to fail. Could have reset and kept spamming quick save, quick load until I managed to break through Titus with unnatural luck. But that wouldn't have been as interesting. By accepting failure and doing something morally unsavory, I had truly lost, and yet it wasn't over. This was a single step in a very large investigation. At this point, I've covered the ways that I think mechanical failure are rooted deep into Disco Elysium, and you're not really meant to succeed at every step. But rather, it's important that after failing, you regroup, reconsider, and find a way to move forward, no matter how loose your lead or how daunting the task ahead is. The next event I'm going to talk about is past the game's point of no return, and also past the point of no return for spoilers, if you want to play the game unspoiled. Now is the time to stop watching the video. At full price, the game is €40 and worth every cent. To skip ahead a couple of days, you finally track down a key suspect, but it's clear that they're not who you were looking for. With another lead gone dead, the investigation goes cold. Unfortunately for our detectives, Martinez has not gone cold. To set the scene for those who haven't played the game, Martinez is a district dominated by its port. The local dockworkers union runs the entire district to the point of replacing the local law enforcement with their own guys. Wild Pines is the corporation who owns the terminal that the union runs, and is now in conflict with the unions as a massive strike has broken out. The unions are demanding a seat on the board of director for Wild Pines. An impressive demand that seems to have incensed the board, as they've decided to retaliate by sending in one of their best. Joyce Messier is a top negotiator, but alongside her, they also sent security contractors, a mercenary group who primarily operate in the Third World equivalent and committed more war crimes than most American presidents. The Hanged Man was one of these mercenaries, and over the course of the game, you learn a couple of facts. He was the leader of the mercenaries, he had a horrific childhood, and his team are planning to avenge him by executing the entirety of the Hardy Boys squad in a military tribunal. The reason they're doing this is because the Hardy Boys claim proudly and loudly that a lynching was a good way to end a Sunday night. The fact that the Hardy Boys didn't kill the victim doesn't really matter, as you don't yet know who did, and the Mercs are willing to take the Hardy Boys at their word over your unfinished investigation. Before you step into the middle, it's obvious that violence is inevitable. You get one last chance to prepare yourself as well as you can. As you step in, it's clear the mercs are willing to humor you, and you get one last chance to get into their heads before it all breaks down. As the list presents itself, it's all red all the way down. You won't get any retries. This is the real deal. This time, you can't afford failure. Methodically, and with precision, you work your way into the minds of the drunk mercenaries, slowly putting them off balance, preparing them for when you strike. Eventually, you work your way down to the bottom of the list, the tension thick in the air. The only thing left is to strike first.
A small explosion expels the bullet from the chamber. With a puff of smoke, it hits the man square in the chest, producing a soft clicking sound in the armor. Like dice rolling, the kinetic energy of the 9mm front-loaded bullet is distributed evenly across the chest piece and into his hands.
Go ahead. Give it another try.
Another soft explosion.
On my first playthrough, I missed both shots, and I couldn't believe it. I was in very real despair. As the fight breaks out, it becomes clear that the only thing left to do is survive. The armor that saved the mercenary from your shot is thankfully not exclusive to them, as your own chest piece, confiscated earlier, takes a blow. Kim, a man with poor eyesight, hits a 1 in a million shot. The remaining mercenaries stare you down, and one more shot aimed straight at your chest, once more right at your armor. As the shot misses its mark, unfortunately hitting you in the legs, taking you out, you start to drift out of consciousness. The lieutenant, briefly forgetting the moment, comes to your aid. And the final check of the tribunal arises. One last check to fuck it all up. 97% is almost a guarantee. But after the failed 2 shots, I felt so confident that dramatic irony would strike once more. And as the dice rolled and the green click of success, I felt relief that even though I failed in the moment, my choices and preparation prior to the tribunal ensured that at least Kim and I made it. As Harry fades back into that void he emerged from all those days ago.
You see the lieutenant's familiar shape in the orange jacket. It turns double, then triple, from the pain.
Sunrise, Parabellum.
As you wake up, you discover you've been out of it for 2 days. Titus, Glenn, Angus, and Theo died. The Hardy Boys are no more. The consequence of missing the shot was the death of Titus. No matter what you do, you can't save everyone. A group of hardened mercenaries, no matter how drunk they were going to do damage. You and Kim, banged up, at wit's end, not much to go on, pay one last visit to a suspect's room in the Whirling Inn Rags. As you enter the room, you see a note left for you there, where she gives you one final gift as a farewell. A piece of string, guiding you to where the shot that killed the hangman came from. An islet off the coast of Martinez. Kim, truly done with this nightmare of a case, gathers up the last of his willpower and summons the courage to follow you on one last manic rush on a case that continues to grow colder by the day.
Want to be free from eternity. Disco
As you land on the island, you quickly find evidence of an inhabitant and a small makeshift bedding. As you inspect the bed, your wounds remind you of their existence, and the lieutenant suggests you take a quick rest to keep yourself going. As you agree, you begin to settle down, and the final dream begins. But before we finish the dream and Harry's memories of who he was, I want to go back a bit. At the end of the first day, you go to sleep and dream. As you stumble to the back of the whirling in rags, instead of the hanged man to greet you, it's yourself hanging from the same tree, the bloated corpse of a drunk illuminated by a disco ball. He belittles you and reveals that you used to have a wife before she left. He asks where your friends are and why you're so alone. As you wake up, electrochemistry tells you this isn't the worst to come. The one with her in it will be far, far worse. On day 3, the waterlock next to the bridge is repaired, allowing you access to the other half of Martinez. Upon crossing the waterlock, you find a motor carriage, half sunken into the ocean, barely held above by the ice. As you investigate it, the mystery of whom it belonged to rapidly clarifies itself. Unfortunately for our dear detective, you rummage through the wreckage of your own motor carriage. Here you discover your badge. When I got the badge, it felt strange, like a flower left in memory of a man only you can mourn. Lieutenant Double Euphrator Harrier Dubois is a man who woke up 3 days ago, truly alone. You don't know how old you are. You don't remember your own name. You don't know your mother, your father, or anyone. The only person left in your memory is a ghost, who your own thoughts warn you not to mess with. And the only person left outside of your memory is your new partner, Kim Kitsuragi. A saint of a man, but a stranger who can't help you remember. Can only give you the resolve to try. Disco Elysium is a murder mystery game. The murder of the hanged man is a muddied, intrigue-ridden mess. How he was killed, why he was killed, and who he was killed by are confusing, difficult, twisting, labyrinthian questions. The would-be assassination of Harrier Dubois is a much less confusing mystery. The method used is alcohol poisoning. Who did it? It was Harry. And why did he do it? Well, that's the second central mystery to Disco Elysium. Discovering who was Harrier Dubois and how did it come to this is as central to the game as who killed the hanged man. Slowly but surely, bit by bit, with every single lost paraphernalia, with every task, with every check, it becomes clearer what killed Harry. And then, on an islet chasing a killer in what increasingly feels like an impossible case, you take a short rest. As you wander off the island in this dreamlike sequence and onto a street, you finally meet her. Not the woman who was real, not the person who left, but Harry's image of her. A saint, an icon, an innocence. Someone closer to heaven than the earth they walked on. Your thoughts become jumbled, their advice mixed as the dream marches on. It becomes clearer that this nightmare haunts Harry, that this moment broke him, and that he can't stop dwelling on it. Love killed Harry. A broken heart, a pure sacred ideal shattering into a million pieces in front of a video rental shop, where he said goodbye to a woman even now he can't properly remember. Thinking of her as a saint, Harrier Dubois as an architect who has built himself a prison, where his ledger contains a poem that traps him in the past, where every apricot sends him to solitary confinement, where even his own political awakening crumbles at the end as her spectre hangs over him, just as it always had, and just like it did on a tumultuous night in the whirling in rags where he failed to kill himself. In failing to kill himself, Harry, for a brief moment, freed himself of the cycle of pain and suffering, of false memories that he was the architect of. Free from these memories of who you were, unchained from the habits that persisted in a violent cycle of self-harm and excess. Harry died, but he gave himself another chance. Rising from what was meant to be his unmarked grave in the whirling in rags, it wasn't a second chance or a third chance, because only God knows when Harry used those. But it was a chance, and after years of failure, hopelessness, and despair culminating in a failed suicide attempt, Harry finally starts to live up to what he can be. A well-meaning, unstable detective who, after years of self-harm, is sober and building himself a path towards a better life. 44 years doesn't just disappear. It's not a guarantee that Harry will succeed, and his work is a grinding one. For every day of triumph and success, there are dark days like the tribunal, to remind him of the unfinished task, to get a drink and forget the day's pain. But after years of failure and defeat, a grinding addiction and grief that he let imprison him, Harry has emerged older, worn and torn, parts of himself lost, but he's not gone, and he's going to try again, and this time it will be different.
We need a win, Andre. I promise this will be a win. We won't cook speed in there.
We'll do it clean. We'll do it true. We'll do it sober and real and beautiful. This will be a victory for the light. In a stuffy tent outside an abandoned church on the edge of a peninsula are a group of young adults, children to the older, cynical detectives. The group consider themselves ravers, the flag bearers of a new type of club music, melodic dance music. But you're not fooled that easily. By inspecting the equipment around and the smell of the tent, it's clear they're going to start a drug lab in the church. They're sincere about the club, and after some verbal wrangling, you can agree to let them into the church to start their club if they promise to keep it clean. This questline is optional, but to me, it's the emotional core of Harry's journey. Inside the church itself, you find the Crabman, as the young girl outside describes him. After a friendly lecture on alcoholism and quitting, you can ask him if he's okay with the nightclub, and he gives his approval. But he mentions that the other resident of the church might not be so happy with it. Before she arrives, you have the ability to snoop around and look at her journal entries. Reading it, you discover she was a programmer in a collapsed games company in the doomed commercial area. It seems that she was the one who took the blame when the company went under after a catastrophic data failure. She arrives shortly after you're finished reading her journal entries and is not happy that you were messing with her computer. After checking and making sure everything's okay, you can finally start asking her questions. Unlike the Crabman, she's not so cool with the future of dance music and really doesn't want them to move in. She is, however, investigating a 2mm hole in the world. A very cool idea, if meaningless to your investigation. But that doesn't mean you can't help her with the project. After some fetch quests, where I definitely didn't struggle on a stupid bear in a stupid basement, then need to put in 2 goddamn levels in order to open it, you can grab the filament. Deeper inside of the area itself, You can grab a different filament that tells the entire story of the games company and the dramatic data failure. Returning to Suna, you can give her the one she was looking for. Using it, she's able to pinpoint the exact location and ask you for help again in order to move the equipment into the proper place so she can actually catch the phenomenon this time. Doing so, she still fails to catch the phenomenon, but you're able to point out that it might be because of her sound system and not out of any other failure. And, as a coincidence, who's better to provide a sound system than the future nightclub owners? The ravers finally moved into the church. An uneasy truce is established. Prepare for the grand experiment.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mute disengaged.
No wind outside, no waves, no floorboards creaking. Total, continuous silence. This is unnatural. The woman looks around. In the silence, you see dust move on the floorboards. The driver of the speaker vibrates in the air and then stops. Plasterwork begins to crumble down the walls. In the silence, a low hum starts creeping up your spine. It's a song inside you, not in the speakers, not in the room. A great bass sigh in the basement of your mind. Slowly, it builds until the air around you starts to vibrate. It's out there now, in the world, made manifest. It will devour everything. The floorboards, the glass, the streets and the people. Nothing will remain.
Guys, what's going on? It's getting louder.
In the basins, the water looks like it's boiling.
Hosiana! Mother of Mega!
In his mind, a tidal wave approaching from afar, swallowing entire coastlines on its way. Salvation. He's peaking. The worst high he's ever been on.
The beauty and the beat! The future of dance! Planetary!
No, Egg! It's the window!
In the corner of your eye, the lieutenant steps aside, cautiously, his eyes searching for a possible evacuation route.
The window is going to come down! No, the roof!
Cracks appear on the stained glass window. Cracks run up the wooden pillars in the dark.
Come down to earth! Love!
It's shaking the building's foundation. The floor twists.
That's it. I'm muting it.
Shit! It doesn't stop. A seal? Have you? Yes, I've turned it off. Andre, pull the compressor! The place is gonna come down!
Fuck! I can't shut it up! The signal's passed! It's not in here! It's...
In the mixing desk now, building into a positive feedback loop. This is it. A great roar. The vault of the roof twists above you. Glass shatters somewhere near the door. It's coming down. And then it stops. Totally and utterly. As if there never was a sound.
After the drama, a wave of relief washes over the room. Suna, most of all. Finally, proof that it wasn't her fault. That there was something physical, something material, something real. As she comes down from the satisfaction of her discovery, her resolve now turned to further investigating the phenomenon and reassuring her co-workers it wasn't anyone's fault. In the detective's mind, an old memory resurfaces, managing to escape from the black, inky grasp of the abyss it was buried in. A homely memory of a time long gone, of an uncomfortable concept discussed at the comfort of home over coffee. The thing inside of the church is pale. The enemy of matter, life, not yet fully formed, an apocalypse in the making. Why was a church built around it? What is the Pale really, and how it works are not mysteries that you can solve in-game. An idea, however, is thrown out, that perhaps the club can help contain it. By being loud, by being present, by being human, maybe the Pale won't grow. Maybe it can be contained. Maybe the apocalypse can be delayed by reckless youth. Now, to get back to the important things, like fetching a tape so it can be remixed for an unsanctioned illegal nightclub. After bringing Egghead a tape to remix, you can decide if you need to go further and help him remix it yourself. Armed with a proper beat, the club is truly ready, and there is only one thing left to do. As the detective begins to move, for a brief moment he wins a battle, in a war that can only be lost against time. As he cajole the others, even Kim, to join in on this pure, simple fun, untainted by the struggle of life in the crumbling ruins of a church. It's here where I believe Harry's potential shines through. Pure, dogged determination, he helps 4 young adults follow a dream without the stench or taint of drugs. Who knows if it will succeed? Perhaps this moment is only that, a moment. But they will have tried and been better for it. Harry is more than a cop at this moment. He's a good person. Hard times and personal failings have set him back. But that doesn't mean he can't do good, can't find joy. It's for this reason I believe the church served as the emotional core of Harry. A show of what he can be, building a brighter future, not without hardship or pain, but free from the cycle of self-harm and addiction. But as he continued dancing, eventually it's too much. The body can't keep it, and you drift off. As you wake up on the island, your sleep is complete shit, like a night after League of Legends. You get back up, and it's time to solve the case. You quickly find the sniper's nest where the shot came from. After so many dead ends, or tangential leads, or complete nonsense, you have finally gotten yourself hard evidence on the killer. You open the blast doors to be greeted by the sight of your final suspect sitting at a campfire.
My name is Josef Lilianovich Dross, Political Commissar of the 114th Anti-Aircraft Division of the 4th Army of the Commune of Revachol.
Josef Lilianovich is a bitter old man. The game does not recognize his name. It calls him the Deserter. A commissar of the revolution, his job was to keep the nerve of his fellow soldiers. But on the eve of the landing, he lost his own nerve and fled. As the coalition killed every man and woman that he knew in order to stamp out an ideology, his heart died in a bunker where he watched the world he knew be torn apart by bombs and gunfire. For 43 years he lived like a cockroach, his commune-issued rifle the only personal effect of his old life that remained. Hopping from island to island, he spies on the people of Revachol through his scope. The only interaction he has with the outside world through the lens of a weapon made to kill. As the world moved on, he stayed stuck in the aftermath of a disastrous war. He refuses to move on, the hate in his heart only growing as the years passed, and Revachol's attempts to move on. He confesses with ease, a tired spiel of hatred from a man who is done but wants to revel in his actions. Slowly but surely, you work your way through his ideas and his politics to finally understand not just his method but his motive. Glazier, the woman who the Merc spent his final nights with, was someone the Deserter formed an obsession about. A strange fixation possessed him, and in a fit of jealousy, although he will never admit to be capable of that feeling, he killed him. He admits casually that he's killed others, even admits to killing the old Union leader for the Clare twins. But these are other cases, and this case is closed. and the old man begins to collapse, his health failing him once more. The deserter and Harry are not the same, but they do share a trait that has dominated them: grief. Harry lives in mourning of a love that was never perfect, of a domestic life that never really happened, and he has destroyed himself as this fantasy tortures him with its contrast to reality. The deserter fled the commune on the night of the collapse, but he still believed in it. He believed in the world they were trying to build, and as that world faltered and collapsed, he refused to accept that his ideals were not the future. As the years passed on and the discrepancy between his ideals and reality grew larger, so too did his hatred for a world that had moved on. The deserter will die soon, bitter, old, in a life defined by a single point of failure. The detective, however, while not young, still has life left to live, and is finally choosing to do better with it. Disco Elysium is a game about failure, but it's also about not letting failure define you. It's about moving on, because it's not that simple, but it's about the ability to choose, to redefine yourself, to rebuild after collapse. That's what I believe Disco Elysium is about. It's a game about failure, but it's also about what you do after.